You remember BuzzLightyear of Star Command? The cartoon on Disney Channel that tells the fictional in-universe story of Buzz Lightyear? You know, the real story of Buzz Lightyear? Not this lame-ass bullshit. It was a good show. Buzz and his fellow space rangers gallivanting around the galaxy, fucking up bad guys and thwarting the plans of the evil Emperor Zurg. Lots of action and comedy. Oh, and I thought Mira was pretty hot. I don't know, there's just something about animated women with red hair and blue skin that really gets the blood rushing. Man, just imagine if Liara was a redhead. Whoa. But just like every half-popular thing in the PS1 era, of course it had to have a video game tie-in. And just like whenever there was a game based on something I was into, you just know I pestered my poor old parents until they bought it for me. So let's get to it. But before we do that, be a darling and subscribe. Go on. You know you want to. Go on. Go on.
Go on, 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 go on!
So the game, Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, was developed by Traveller's Tales and published by Disney Interactive and Activision in the year 2000. It was on PS1, Dreamcast and Windows, and there was going to be a version on N64, but that got cancelled because... fuck nars. Now I know what you think I'm going to say next. I've only played it on PS1. Well, wrong you daft fuckers, because there was also a version on Game Boy Color. I never owned many titles on the old Game Boy, but this was one of the ones I actually did. So yeah, maybe we'll take a look at that as well if we have time. So, Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. It's a game that, you know, that you play with the controller, and yeah, you'll see in a minute why this game's genre is kind of hard to pin down. So you play as everyone's favourite space ranger and have to catch the bad guys from the show. But just how do you do that? Well, how about I let the boss man himself explain it?
Now, Buzz, your mission in each level is to arrest the bad guy. You can't beat the criminals early. You can only make an arrest at their getaway spot.
So in each mission, you go after a villain from the show and have to beat them to the end of the course, while fighting through tons of regular baddies along the way. So yeah, at its heart, it's a racing game, I suppose. Although it does feel a bit strange to call it that, considering you're on foot for most of it. But it also draws on other genres as well, but never to the point where it can be placed into said genre. I mean, there's shooting, but it doesn't really factor in enough to call it a shooter, and there's a bit of platforming as well. But again, it doesn't play a big enough role to call it a platformer either. So yeah, you pick a mission and confront the perp, but rather than just, you know, arrest them, you've got to chase them to their getaway spot. Because... why? Seriously, what the fuck's up with that shit? The fucker's literally right there. Just blast him. But no, because the boss man's all like...
you can't beat the criminals early.
What the fuck? That's like if you're watching, I don't know, World's Wildest Police Chases or something, and the pursuing officer's like, I got this motherfucker, gonna run his sorry ass off the road. And then his supervisor's like, now hold your fucking horses, trooper. We need the perp to reach his getaway spot before we can haul his ass in. But sir, I got the guy right here. I'm bringing him in. Don't argue with me, trooper. How'd you make it out the fucking academy? You know that's not how we do things in this precinct. We can't just arrest the perp right away. We need to waste countless fuel, resources, and manpower first. Gotta use up all that taxpayers' money somehow. Alright, so even though the premise is a bit thin and makes no sense whatsoever, there is a bit more to this game than first meets the eye. As you make your way along the course, you'll pick up coins or credits that you can use to buy new weapons and vehicles to help you move faster, as well as other power-ups like shields. You pick all this shit up along the course as well. You also get credits for killing enemies, and you can get this thing that makes the big red guy, what's his name, fucking Boomer or something, come down and blow everything up. So you've made it to the end of the course. Now can you arrest the prick? Nope. Now you've got to fight the fucker. These fights are bog standard. The enemy will have a shield around them, the colour of which indicates the weapon you have to use on them. If the shield's green, you've got to hit them with the weapon that fires green projectiles. If it's purple, then you've got to use the purple one, and so on. In the end, all these fights play out pretty much the same. You just equip the correct weapon and blast the fucker as much as you can. When one shield goes down, switch to your next weapon and do the same, until they're dead. If you reach the end of the course before the boss, then Mirror will be waiting, and she'll blast them to take down some of their health, and then she just fucks off. Oh, thanks Mirror. You don't feel like backing me up here? You just gonna blast the fucker then bugger off and let me deal with it? Okay. Fine. Some friend you are. Anyway, you beat the fucker and finally you can haul their sorry arse off to space jail, and that's the level done. And wow, this game's easy. It hasn't even been 20 minutes and I'm already on to mission 3. But wait. What? That's right. Just completing missions alone doesn't unlock the next one. Instead you've got to earn a certain number of medals. And how do you get the medals? Well, you get one for beating a mission, and you'll get another for collecting a certain number of credits. And you'll also come across little green men along the way, and if you collect all of them, that's another medal, so that's 3. But even then, just getting all of those per mission won't be enough when you get further into the game. So how do you get more? Well, there's a couple other challenges to complete as well. There's Time Attack where you do the level again, but instead of racing the boss, you're now racing against the clock. Get to the end in time, you get a medal. Beat the best time and you'll get another. And then there's an item collection mode, where you go along the track and have to collect the pieces of the robot guy, XR or whatever. So yeah, considering this game's pretty easy, and doesn't take that long to get through, the developers came up with a clever way to draw out the game and give the player more bang for their buck. Making you play the same fucking levels over and over again. Yeah, if you don't have enough medals to start the next mission, just go back and grind the same levels again and again to get more. So basically like most games these days, except you don't have to grind nearly as long and there isn't the option to just pay money to unlock the levels. Man, these guys were so ahead of their time. Or they just realised that their game was too short and easy, and rather than, I don't know, making more levels or adding more interesting game modes, the best they could come up with was this shit, making you do the levels again, and adding a couple game modes which actually don't change anything whatsoever. The time attack's exactly the same as the normal mission, just instead of racing the bad guy, you're racing the clock, and there's no boss fight at the end, and the item collection's the same as well. It's the exact same course except you just pick up a robot part every once in a while. They're not even hidden or anything. But yeah, the best way is to try and get as many medals as you can on your first go. So beat the level and collect as many credits as possible, and make sure to get all the little green men. You'll still have to replay a couple levels, but it won't be to the point where it's really annoying. So let's dive deeper into the gameplay. What about the controls? Well, you remember that scale I showed in Spyro 1 a few videos back? Ranking controls from good to shit? Well, the controls here probably land on the lower end of the scale. Although to be honest, they're really not that bad. Just kind of average for PS1. Yeah, Buzz is a bit clunky to control, but that's pretty much the same for most games from this era. It's not too bad. However, for this type of game, it's the controls that really bring it down. What do I mean by that? Well, basically for pretty much any other game, the controls here will be fine. But for a racing game where you're trying to move fast, they're fucking terrible. You'll be going through these levels, trying to get to the end before the boss, and you'll be constantly getting stuck on all the shit in your way, bringing your momentum screeching to a halt, and it just doesn't feel good in a racing game if you're constantly stopping and starting all the time. And then it's really hard to make small or precise movements, like when you're trying to zero in on a fucking alien and you shoot by it because you're not dead on target, right down to the fucking pixel, and then you're having to fuck around trying to turn around and pick this thing up. And then you're constantly getting stuck on shit like enemies and turrets, and it's hard to get yourself unstuck again. Outside of the boss fights, the combat's pretty much pointless. The regular enemies you encounter along the way are really just there to slow you down and make the mission seem longer. I mean, you can choose to stop and fight them if you want, which will allow you to pick up some coins to buy new weapons and shit, but you can find enough coins along the course anyway, and it takes so long to kill most of them that all you're really doing is mostly just wasting time and letting the boss get ahead of you and reach the end first. I ended up ignoring most of the enemies and skipping past them, just so I could get to the end before the boss. And the combat itself's pretty shit too. All it really amounts to is mashing the fire button while wrestling with the shitty ass controls to get yourself facing in the right direction to hit the fuckers, which, if it hasn't already been made abundantly clear, is a lot fucking easier said than done. You know how in other games from back then where it's pretty hard to aim because the controls aren't very good, but the game mitigates that by having your aim locked to nearby enemies? Well, you don't have that here. So if you want to shoot something, then you've got to stop and fuck around to make sure you're facing in exactly the right direction, which just wastes time and lets the boss get further ahead. It's not much better in the boss fights either. Here the bosses just run or fly around all over the place, so it's hard to get a bead on them. And because you can't aim or lock onto them, all you can really do is just run around and keep spamming the fire button, in the hope you get some hits in. The game's also super repetitive. Virtually every mission follows the same structure and plays out in exactly the same way. You just race the boss to the end and then fight them. That's it. They do introduce a few new concepts along the way, such as bombs you've got to destroy before they go off or you'll fail the mission. And some missions do have multiple paths which can yield different rewards, but in the end it doesn't make much difference. Now, to be fair, there are a couple missions that do have legitimately unique characteristics that set them apart from the rest. There's one that takes place on an underwater world where you have to swim instead of run, which, considering the repetitiveness of the rest of the game, I was actually surprised that the developers went to the trouble of producing unique animations for. And then there's the mission where you're going after Wirewolf, where rather than just being a straight up race, you stop at various points and have to defeat waves of enemies before you can continue, in the only part of the whole game outside of the boss fights where the combat actually matters. And then you've got this whole daft racing premise that makes absolutely no sense. I just don't get it. Who came up with this shit? I mean, I probably didn't give a shit back when I was a dumb little kid, but now I just can't get my head around it. Why would you race the guy you're trying to capture instead of just, capturing them? And what's more is, the game would lose nothing if they took this out. It'd be virtually the same. Why not just have Buzz fighting his way through enemies to get to the end of the level where he has to fight the boss? Maybe have to get there within a time limit before the boss escapes? I don't know. What I do know is it would have made a hell of a lot more sense than this shit. Maybe they were trying to do something a bit different, but in the end, it just didn't work. Alright, so I think we've established pretty clearly that the gameplay is not very good. But what about the presentation side? Well, the graphics are pretty decent for the time, I suppose. In Toy Story 2, the art style had a more realistic look, I guess to reflect the look of the films, while this game has a much more cartoony look to resemble, yeah, the cartoon. The graphics are brighter and more colourful, which I like, and the character models are pretty good for the most part, although some of the faces are still a bit fucked up. Like, what the fuck is that? What the fuck did they do to warp dark matter? Seriously, how do you go from this to that? The voice acting's passable for the most part. It's fine. Most of it's just taken from the cartoon, like how most of the voices in Toy Story 2 are taken from the films. But some of the original voice acting is cringy as fuck, particularly from Buzz himself. See, at the start of each level you get a little intro where Buzz converses with the perp and delivers some of the lamest one-liners you'll ever hear in a video game.
You'll never stop me, BuzzLightyear!
Well, I'll just have to give it the old Ranger try, won't I?
The music's fine, I would say. It's pretty standard for this type of game. It just does what it's supposed to. There's not a whole lot you can say about it. Although I will admit that a couple tracks have stuck in my memory for years since I first played this game, and I'm not really sure why. Funny the kinds of things that get stuck with you. Yeah. There's no story to speak of. No narrative linking each mission to one another. You get a cutscene before every mission relating to the bad guy you're after, but it's just a little snippet from the show that's just slipped in there with no context or reason. So yeah, lack of a coherent story doesn't help to make you feel any more compelled to keep playing. So as you'll probably have guessed, the last guy you go after is the evil Emperor Zurg himself. Yeah, it's just another race, maybe slightly longer and harder. Longer and harder. But nothing different from what's come before. You just beat him to the end, fuck his purple robot arse up, and there you go, you're done. But wait, what? There's more? But I beat Zurg. What else could there be? What, is it going to be the fucking imposter Buzz or something? Oh, it's just Zurg again. And to be honest, I'm not surprised nor disappointed that we have to fight Zurg again. I mean, you can't just take down the evil Emperor Zurg, Buzz's ultimate rival, the Darth Vader of this universe, with the same tired old bullshit as before. But no, this isn't just another daft race and chase mission, but an actual final fight. And to be honest, this was actually a pretty cool boss battle. I mean, it's not super epic or complex, but it's definitely got more going on than in the previous fights. Basically, instead of just running around and firing aimlessly in the hope of getting some hits in, Zurg is on a platform in the centre of the arena, disappearing out of view while spawning in waves of enemies. Once you defeat them all, he drops down and then you blast him as much as you can before he goes back up and spawns more. Do that until you drop his health and then he's like,
Fine. I'll do it myself.
and then you run around and fire aimlessly in the hope of getting some hits in. Yeah, it becomes more like the regular boss fights at this point, but there's still more going on. I mean, I was blasting this fucker with the right weapon, but he wasn't losing his health, and I was like, what the fuck? Am I doing something wrong? Well, you see these electric bits going round and round? Well, if they touch you, not only do you lose health, but Zurg also gets his back, the sneaky fucker. Anyway, once I figured that out, which took longer than I care to admit, then it was pretty easy. So anyway, you beat Zurg again and he gets to spend the rest of his life watching his back in the showers at the Star Command Supermax Penitentiary. And well, there you go. That's the end of the game. Not more to do. I mean, you can go back and get any medals you might have missed. I'm not sure why you'd want to do that, but you can if you want. Or don't if you don't want to. I mean, you don't have to do what I tell you. What am I, your fucking mother? So that's BuzzLightyear of Star Command on PS1. And in conclusion, well, in the words of Delboy,
it's a bit of a pig.
Yep, couldn't have said it any better myself. That pretty much sums it up. So yeah, if you haven't figured it out yet, this game isn't that great. It's got a daft premise, it's repetitive as fuck, it's not very challenging, it doesn't control very well, the combat's almost pointless, and in the end, it's just a pretty nothing game. The only saving grace is that it's also pretty harmless. And short. You know how long it took me to finish it? About 3 hours? 3.5? Yeah, and that's with the fucking thing forcing you to replay parts of it just to pad itself out. So yeah, unless you really want to relive some childhood nostalgia, there's not much reason to go back to this one. And that's pretty much all there is to say. Well, I guess I said we'd have a look at the Game Boy Color version if we got time, so let's take a look at that real quick. Oh wow, now this really takes me back. Nice little 8-bit rendition of the theme song. So there really isn't that much to say, it's pretty much exactly the same as the PS1 version. Although, funnily enough, I actually think I prefer this version. It's not challenging at all, you could probably beat it in less than an hour, but it actually controls better. And I just feel like this concept is better suited for Game Boy rather than a full release on home consoles. So yeah, take a look if you want. Or don't. I don't give a shit what you do. Well, there's another video to tide you content fiends over. I hope you liked it. And yeah, that's it. No funny or interesting parting remarks, just hope you enjoyed. Look, what do you want from me? I've already said over 3,500 words. Seriously, go back and count. Anyway, thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, then please like and subscribe. If you didn't, then tell me to go fuck myself, which nobody has done so far, so I guess everybody likes my videos. That, or most of them don't make it this far, which the analytics seem to suggest. But anyway, I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks again.